The leather chair in Harrison Blackwell's office felt too big for Beth Young. Or maybe she'd simply shrunk in the 3 weeks since Robert's funeral. She pulled the black dress closer around her shoulders, though the room wasn't cold. Across the polished mahogany table, her son Leo sat in his perfectly tailored charcoal suit, scrolling through his phone with the casual confidence of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. Mrs. Young, Mr. Young. Harrison adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and cleared his throat. The family attorney had known them for decades, had drawn up Robert's first will when Leo was still in college, had witnessed every revision over the years. But today, something in his careful movements made Beth uneasy. "Before I begin," Harrison said, sliding a thick document across the table, "I want to assure you both that everything here is legally binding and precisely as Mr. Young instructed." Beth's fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the water glass in front of her. That phrasing, legally binding, felt like a warning wrapped in formality. Leo pocketed his phone, finally giving the proceedings his attention. "Of course it is, Harrison. Dad was always thorough." The reading began with the standard legal language, words that blurred together in Beth's grief-fogged mind. Trust provisions, tax considerations, executor responsibilities. Harrison's voice droned on, professional and measured, until, "To my son, Leo Young, I leave the penthouse residence located at 2800 Wilshire Boulevard, Los Angeles, including all furnishings and personal effects therein." Harrison paused. "Additionally, the primary investment portfolio currently valued at approximately $4.2 million, comprising stocks, bonds, and mutual funds as detailed in Schedule A." Beth watched his son's face transform. The solemn mask of grief shifted, just for a moment, into something else. Satisfaction, maybe even triumph. His hand moved to her shoulder, squeezing slightly too hard. "Don't worry, Mom," Leo whispered, leaning close enough that Harrison couldn't hear. "I'll make sure you're taken care of." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like a hand closing around her throat. Harrison continued, his voice dropping almost apologetically. "And to my beloved wife, Beth Young, I leave the property located at 1420 Industrial Parkway." He looked up, meeting her eyes with something that might have been pity. "The garage and its contents?" Silence filled the room, like water rushing into a sinking ship. "I'm sorry," Beth heard herself say, though she wasn't sure why she was apologizing. "Could you repeat that?" "The property at 1420 Industrial Parkway," Harrison said slowly. "A garage facility, and whatever is contained within it." Leo's hand was still on her shoulder, but the pressure had changed. Not comforting now, almost possessive. "A garage," he repeated, his voice carefully neutral. "That's unexpected." Unexpected. Such a polite word for what Beth was feeling. 42 years of marriage, 42 years of building a life together, of compromise and sacrifice, of putting Robert's career first, of raising their son, of being the woman everyone expected her to be. And Robert had left her a garage. "There must be some mistake," she managed. Harrison shook his head. "I assure you, Mrs. Young, these were your husband's specific instructions. He revised the will 6 years ago and confirmed these provisions annually thereafter." 6 years. Right after his diagnosis. Right after the doctor had told them about the heart condition that would eventually take him. Robert had known he was dying, and this This was what he'd planned. Is there anything else? Leo asked, and Beth recognized that tone. He used it in business meetings when he'd already gotten what he wanted and was ready to move on. Property tax information, transfer documents, keys. Harrison slid 2 envelopes across the table. Everything you need is here. Mrs. Young, the garage property has been maintained by a management company. The fees are paid through the end of next year. Beth took the envelope with numb fingers. Inside, she could feel the weight of a single key. Well, Leo stood, buttoning his suit jacket in one smooth motion. I think we should all take some time to process this. Harrison, thank you for handling everything so professionally. Mom, let me drive you home. Home? The penthouse where she'd lived for the last 15 years of her marriage. The home that was now Leo's. The drive back was a blur of Los Angeles traffic and Leo's one-sided conversation about renovation plans, investment strategies, and maximizing the asset. Beth stared out the window, watching the city slide past, feeling like a ghost in her own life. The penthouse looked different when they walked through the door. Or maybe Beth was just seeing it through different eyes. The panoramic windows overlooking the city, the marble floors Robert had insisted on, the gallery wall of family photos. It all belonged to Leo now. He set her small overnight bag down in the entryway. Not her suitcase, just the bag she'd packed for staying at her sister's house right after Robert died, when the penthouse had felt too empty, too full of memories. Mom, I think it would be best if you found somewhere else to stay. The words came so casually that Beth wasn't sure she'd heard him correctly. What? The penthouse. Leo gestured around them as if she might be confused about which property he meant. It's mine now. It's in the will. Leo, I know the will says I'm having some colleagues over tomorrow to discuss converting Dad's study into a home office. I need to start making changes. His voice had that rehearsed quality she had heard him use in business negotiations. Smooth, reasonable, utterly inflexible. But where am I supposed to go? The question came out smaller than she'd intended. Bewildered, lost. Leo shrugged, the gesture somehow more cruel for its casualness. You could stay with Aunt Helen for a while. Or... He paused, and something cold flickered in his eyes. There's always that garage Dad left you. He laughed, a short, sharp sound that cut through the air between them. Though why he left you that dump is beyond me. What are you going to do with it? Open a mechanic shop at your age? Beth reached for the back of a nearby chair, needing something solid to hold on to. This is my home, Leo. Your father and I, it's not your home anymore. He cut her off, his voice hardening in a way she'd never heard before. Not even during his teenage years, during all the arguments about college and career and choices. It's mine. Dad made that perfectly clear. I need time to find somewhere to go. Surely you don't expect me to leave tonight? But even as she said it, she could see the answer in his face. You're just a useless old woman, Mom. The words landed like physical blows. What would you even do with a real inheritance? Dad knew that. The cruelty was so unexpected, so completely at odds with the boy she'd raised. The child she'd rocked through nightmares, the teenager she'd helped with homework, the young man she'd been so proud of that Beth couldn't even form a response. She stood there frozen while her son checked his watch and frowned. I have a conference call in 20 minutes, he said, already moving toward his father's study. You should probably pack whatever you need. Beth walked to what had been her bedroom on autopilot. In the closet, her clothes hung next to empty space, where Robert's suits had been. Leo must have already removed them, donated them, probably, or sold them. Everything that could be converted to value, efficiently processed and disposed of. She pulled out a small suitcase and began to pack. Not everything, she couldn't carry everything, just essentials. A few changes of clothes, her toiletries, the framed photo from her bedside table, her and Robert on their 40th anniversary, his arm around her waist, both of them laughing at something the photographer had said. When she emerged into the living room, Leo was on his call, speaking in that confident voice about market opportunities and strategic positioning. He barely glanced up as she moved toward the door. On the gallery wall, the family photos seemed to watch her leave. Leo at 6, missing his 2 front teeth. Leo at 12, holding his Little League trophy. Leo at 25, shaking hands with Robert at his first major business deal. And tucked in the corner, almost as an afterthought, the photo from Disneyland, Leo wrapped in her arms, grinning at the camera with pure joy. She wondered how long it would take him to remove that one. Beth collected her purse and the envelope from Harrison. Inside was a key attached to a simple metal tag, 1420 Industrial Parkway. And beneath it, a brief note in Robert's handwriting. Everything you need is here. The penthouse door clicked shut behind her with a finality that echoed through her chest. For 2 hours, Beth drove aimlessly through Los Angeles, past the restaurants where she and Robert had celebrated anniversaries, past the park where they'd taken Leo as a child, past the doctor's office where they'd received the diagnosis that had changed everything. It was her birthday, her 68th birthday, and she was homeless. The realization should have brought tears, but Beth found herself beyond crying. She felt hollowed out, like one of those chocolate bunnies Leo had loved as a child, solid looking on the outside, empty within. Her phone buzzed, a text from her sister Helen. "Hope you're having a wonderful birthday. Dinner next week." Beth turned the phone off. The GPS led her to an unfamiliar part of the city as night fell. Industrial warehouses gave way to auto body shops and storage facilities. Not dangerous exactly, but not somewhere she'd normally venture after dark. The kind of neighborhood that looked even grimmer under the harsh glare of streetlights. 4020 Industrial Parkway sat at the end of a narrow street, partially hidden behind a faded chain-link fence. The building looked like it had been forgotten by time. A squat, single-story structure with peeling paint and windows so filthy they were nearly opaque. A rusted padlock secured the main door. Beth sat in her car for a long moment, staring at what her husband had left her. This was it. This was what 42 years of marriage had been worth. She wanted to laugh or scream or drive away and never come back. Instead, she pulled the key from the envelope. The October air was cool against her skin as she approached the building. The key looked too new for such an old lock, but it slid in smoothly. The mechanism clicked and the padlock fell open in her hand. Beth pushed the door. It groaned in protest, the sound loud in the quiet street. She fumbled for her phone, turning it back on and activating the flashlight. The beam cut through decades of darkness and revealed something impossible. The garage interior wasn't filled with junk or abandoned tools. Instead, 3 vehicles sat in perfect formation, each covered with custom-fitted cloth covers in a deep charcoal gray. The covers looked expensive, professional, the kind of thing you'd see in a high-end car collection, not an abandoned garage in an industrial neighborhood. But it was what she could see beneath the edge of the nearest cover that made her breath catch. A silver grille, chrome gleaming even under the dust of the cloth, the unmistakable shape of something rare, something valuable. "Robert," Beth whispered into the silence. "What on earth were you doing?" Her hand trembled as she reached for the corner of the first cover. The fabric was soft, far too fine for protecting old junk cars. She pulled gently and the cover slid away like water. The 1964 Aston Martin DB5 gleamed under her flashlight beam as if it had just rolled off the factory floor. Silver birch paint caught the light and threw it back in perfect curves. Chrome details sparkled like jewelry. The leather interior, visible through the window, was pristine. Beth had seen this car before. In movies, in Robert's beloved James Bond films that he'd watched over and over, much to her affectionate exasperation. But this wasn't a poster or a screen image. This was real. This was here. This was hers. Her legs felt weak. She moved to the second car, pulling away its cover with hands that no longer felt entirely connected to her body. A 1956 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing emerged, its distinctive doors and elegant lines unmistakable even to her untrained eye. The deep blue paintwork looked wet in the flashlight beam. The third cover concealed a Ferrari. The small placard beside it read 1967 275 GTB 4 in neat lettering. Deep red, the color of the wine Robert always ordered on their anniversaries. Each car had a leather portfolio positioned nearby on custom stands. Beth opened the nearest one with shaking hands. Documentation, authenticity certificates, purchase agreements, maintenance records dating back years. These weren't just nice old cars. These were museum pieces, investments, treasures. "I don't understand," she said aloud, her voice strange in the cavernous space. "Robert, I don't understand." That's when she noticed the envelope. It was taped to the wall beside a light switch, her name written across the front in Robert's distinctive handwriting. The same careful script that had written, "Everything you need is here on the key tag." Beth pulled the envelope down with numb fingers and found the light switch beneath it. The garage flooded with light. LED fixtures recessed into the ceiling illuminated a space that looked nothing like the derelict building she'd seen from outside. Climate control systems hummed quietly in the corners. The flooring was industrial-grade epoxy, sealed and spotless. Security cameras blinked red in the corners. Custom storage lined the walls, each cabinet labeled and organized. This wasn't an abandoned garage. This was a carefully designed automotive sanctuary. Beth sank onto a leather bench positioned against one wall, the envelope heavy in her hands. Her reflection stared back at her from the Aston Martin's polished chrome. A 68-year-old woman in a funeral dress, holding a letter from her dead husband, surrounded by millions of dollars in vintage cars she hadn't known existed. Outside, somewhere in the Los Angeles night, Leo was probably already measuring his father's study for renovation, already planning how to maximize the value of his inheritance, already forgetting the mother he'd called useless. But here, in this impossible garage, Beth Young broke the seal on the envelope and began to read her husband's final words. And everything she thought she knew about her marriage, her son, and her future was about to change. Beth's hands trembled as she unfolded the pages. Robert's stationery, the cream-colored paper he'd always preferred, with his initials embossed at the top. She could almost smell his cologne, almost hear his voice reading the words aloud. My dearest Beth, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've discovered what I've come to think of as my final gift to you. First, I need to say, I'm sorry. Sorry for the shock you must be feeling right now. Sorry for the confusion. Sorry for every moment of the past 6 years when I wanted to tell you about this place and couldn't. The secrecy wasn't meant to hurt you, my love. It was meant to protect what I was building for your future. 6 years ago, when Dr. Morrison gave me the diagnosis, he said 5 years at best. I beat his timeline by 1 year, not bad for a stubborn old man. But from that moment in his office, I knew our time together was limited, and I needed to ensure you would be taken care of after I was gone. Beth pressed her hand to her mouth. Robert had always downplayed the severity of his condition, always insisted he had plenty of time left. She'd had no idea he'd been planning for the end from the very beginning. I know you're wondering about the will, about why I would leave our home to Leo instead of to you. Believe me, Beth, this decision caused me more sleepless nights than my failing heart ever did. But over the past decade, I've watched our son change. The ambitious boy we raised, the one who used to spend hours building things with his hands, who cried when his goldfish died, who wanted to be an architect so he could design homes for families. That boy has become something different, something harder, something I never wanted him to be. The truth is, I feared what would happen to you if I left everything to both of you jointly, or even if I split things equally. Leo would have found ways to control the assets, to manage your portion for your benefit, as he would say. I've seen how he speaks to you when he thinks I'm not listening, how he dismisses your opinions, how he treats your needs as inconveniences. A tear splashed onto the paper, blurring the ink slightly. Beth hadn't realized Robert had noticed those small moments, the interruptions, the eye rolls, the subtle condescension that had crept into Leo's interactions with her over the years. I know what you're thinking. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. You're not. I've kept notes, Beth. Dates and times when I witnessed our son treating you with disrespect that no mother should tolerate. I wanted evidence not just for you, but for myself. Proof that I wasn't being paranoid or unfair. Christmas 3 years ago, Leo interrupted you 17 times during dinner. I counted your birthday last year. He cancelled lunch with you because a client meeting ran long. The meeting was a golf game. I called his office. The gallery opening you were so excited about, he didn't show up. Said he forgot. I saw the reminder you'd sent him. 3 reminders. These aren't the actions of a son who values his mother. These are the actions of a man who has forgotten where he came from, who he came from. Beth set the letter down for a moment, her chest tight. She'd made excuses for every one of those incidents. Leo was busy. Leo was under pressure. Leo was focused on his career. She'd spent years justifying his behavior, smoothing over the hurt, telling herself she was being too demanding. But Robert had seen. Robert had known. So I created this split inheritance with very deliberate intentions, my love. Leo has received what he will see as the valuable portion. The penthouse, the visible investments, the status symbols that matter so much to him. Let him have them. Let him think he won. But what you're looking at right now, these three beautiful machines, this is the real wealth. The 1964 Aston Martin DB5, I paid $980,000 for it 4 years ago. Current market value is approximately $4.2 million. The 1956 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing, purchase price $1.1 million. Current value $4.8 million. The 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB 4. I found this gem for $850,000. It's worth $3.5 million now and climbing. Total current value approximately $12.5 million. The documentation in the portfolios will confirm everything. You'll also find contact information for Marcus Weatherby, the advisor who helped me acquire these cars. He can help you with whatever you decide to do with them. Beth looked up at the three gleaming vehicles. $12.5 million. She'd been married to a man for 42 years and never known he was building a secret fortune in vintage automobiles. But the cars are just the beginning, Beth. Behind the photograph of us in Venice, you know, the one from our 35th anniversary when that street musician serenaded us on the Rialto Bridge? There's a safe. The combination is our wedding anniversary. AO9-15-83. Inside that safe, you'll find documentation for several investment properties I've acquired over the past 6 years. All of them are in a living trust that transferred to your name the moment I died. You'll also find banking information for accounts that should provide you with a very comfortable income for the rest of your life. I won't write the total value here. I want you to discover it yourself when you're ready. But know this, you are a wealthy woman, Beth Young. You will never need to depend on anyone's charity or goodwill. Not Leo's, not anyone's. Beth rose unsteadily and crossed to the wall where a framed photograph hung. The Venice photo Robert had mentioned. She and Robert on the Rialto Bridge, laughing as a violinist played That's Amore while tourists streamed past. One of the happiest moments of her life, captured forever. She lifted the frame from the wall. Behind it, flush-mounted and nearly invisible, was a small digital safe. Her fingers shook as she entered the numbers. 091583. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, a thick leather portfolio rested alongside several USB drives, each one neatly labeled. Property deeds, investment accounts, trust documents, banking information. Beth pulled out the portfolio and returned to the bench. The first page was titled in bold letters, Estate of Robert Young, Complete Asset Inventory for Beth Young. She flipped it open and immediately had to sit down. Seattle apartment complex, 24 units. Purchase 3.2 million, current value $4.8 million, annual net income $285,000. Chicago commercial property, purchase 2.8 million, current value 3.9 million, annual net income $245,000. Northern California vineyard, 45 acres, purchased 1.9 m, current value 3.2 PMS, annual net income $180,000, stock portfolio various, current value 2.4 m, bond holdings, current value 1.8 mm, private equity investments, current value 3.1 m. The numbers continued down the page, and the next page, and the next, At the bottom of the final page, in Robert's handwriting, total estimated value 38.7 M. $38.7 million. Beth's ears rang. The garage seemed to tilt around her. "Robert," she whispered. "My God, Robert!" With numb fingers, she returned to his letter. "I know this is overwhelming. I'm sorry for keeping it from you, but I had my reasons. At first, it was just a project to channel my anxiety about the future, something productive to do with the fear that came with the diagnosis. But as the portfolio grew, I realized revealing it prematurely might put it at risk. If Leo discovered the extent of these holdings while I was still alive, he would have found ways to insert himself, to help manage it, to gradually take control. You're probably wondering why I didn't simply protect you through more conventional means. A trust with professional management, guaranteed income, clear legal boundaries. The truth is, I wanted to give Leo a chance to show his true character. Perhaps faced with his inheritance and the responsibility for your welfare, he would rise to become the man we raised him to be. Perhaps he would prove me wrong about the changes I'd witnessed. If he's proven himself worthy, if he's ensured your comfort and security, if he's treated you with the respect and love you deserve, then perhaps you might choose to share some of this wealth with him. That decision is entirely yours. But if he has revealed a different nature, well, then this legacy is your protection against that reality, your independence, your freedom. Beth had to stop reading as a sob escaped her. Robert had known. He had anticipated exactly what would happen, had foreseen how Leo would react to gaining control of the penthouse. The cruelty, the eviction, the casual dismissal of his own mother on her birthday. I've always believed that character reveals itself most clearly at moments of inheritance, both what we receive and what we believe we deserve. Leo is receiving a test as much as an inheritance, a chance to demonstrate who he really is when he thinks no one is watching, when there are no consequences for his choices. And you, my darling Beth, are receiving the means to live the remainder of your life exactly as you choose, beholden to no one, dependent on nothing but your own wisdom and strength. I've also included something else in the property documentation, a cottage in Carmel. Do you remember that weekend we spent there 10 years ago? Walking on the beach in the morning fog, eating clam chowder at that little restaurant by the wharf, watching the sunset from Scenic Drive? You said you could live there forever. So, I bought you a place where you can. The cottage is fully furnished and ready for you whenever you want it. I've paid all the property taxes and utilities through next year. There's even a neighbor, Margaret Hayes, who's been keeping an eye on it. I told her about you. She's expecting you, though she doesn't know when you'll arrive. Go there, Beth. Make it your home. Make it your new beginning. All my love, now and always, Robert P.S. One more thing. In the safe, there's a smaller envelope marked for difficult days. Save it for when you need it most. You'll know when. Beth clutched the letter to her chest, tears flowing freely now. After 42 years of marriage, she thought she'd known everything about her husband. His favorite breakfast, oatmeal with blueberries. His tendency to fall asleep during movies. The way he hummed while reading the newspaper. The particular way he said her name when he came home from work. But this elaborate plan, this secret fortune, this final act of protection and love, she was only now discovering the true depth of Robert's devotion. The tears eventually subsided, leaving Beth feeling hollowed out, but somehow lighter. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and looked around the garage with new understanding. This wasn't just a storage facility for expensive cars. This was Robert's workshop, his project, his way of caring for her when he knew he wouldn't be there to do it himself. She explored more carefully now, opening cabinets along the walls. One contained detailing supplies for the cars, brushes, cloths, specialized cleaners, all organized with Robert's characteristic precision. Another held documentation, insurance policies, maintenance schedules, appraisal reports. A door at the back of the garage led to what Robert had described in his letter as an office. But it was more than that. It was a small apartment, compact but complete. The main room held a leather sofa that looked expensive and comfortable, a desk with a laptop and printer, and a bookshelf containing some of Robert's favorite novels. Beth recognized several of them, books she'd given him over the years, their spines creased from multiple readings. A small bathroom was tucked into one corner, surprisingly modern, with a walk-in shower, heated floors, and thick white towels folded on a chrome rack. The medicine cabinet contained basics: aspirin, bandages, antacids, even a new toothbrush still in its package. The mini refrigerator hummed quietly, stocked with water bottles, cheese, crackers, fruit. A small basket on the counter held granola bars, tea bags, and a note. In case you need a place to stay, everything has been selected with you in mind. But it was the closet that made Beth's breath catch again. Inside hung several outfits: pants, blouses, a cardigan, even a comfortable pair of shoes, all in her size, all in colors and styles she would have chosen for herself. The tags were still attached, but these weren't random purchases. Each piece was from brands she preferred, in cuts that would flatter her figure. Robert had anticipated that she might need temporary shelter here, had prepared for the possibility that their son would make her homeless. The realization was both heartbreaking and infuriating. Heartbreaking that Robert had foreseen this scenario. Infuriating that he'd been right. Beth pulled out her phone. No messages from Leo. No, "Where are you?" or "Are you okay?" Nothing. But there was a voicemail from her sister Helen. "Beth, honey, happy birthday. I know it's a hard day. Call me when you can. Love you." Beth couldn't call her back. Not yet. She wasn't ready to explain any of this. Wasn't ready to put into words what she was feeling. Instead, she found the envelope Robert had mentioned. The one marked "For difficult days." Inside was a single card with a photograph attached. The photo showed Beth at age 26, pregnant with Leo, laughing at something off camera. She was sitting in a park, one hand on her swollen belly, her face bright with joy and anticipation. On the back of the photo, Robert had written, "You were never useless. You created life. You built a home. You loved unconditionally, even when that love wasn't returned the way it should have been. You are stronger than you know. I believe in you." Beth pressed the card to her heart and finally let herself grieve, not just for Robert's death, but for the son she'd lost somewhere along the way. The boy in the Disneyland photo had grown into a man who could call his mother useless on her birthday and not even have the grace to feel ashamed. She cried until there were no tears left. Then she made herself a cup of tea from Robert's careful provisions, wrapped herself in a soft throw blanket she found on the sofa, and fell asleep surrounded by $12 million in vintage automobiles and a fortune in properties she hadn't known existed. For the first time in 3 weeks, she slept deeply and dreamlessly. Sunlight filtered through the high windows of the garage, casting geometric patterns across the spotless floor. Beth woke on the leather sofa, momentarily disoriented. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back. The will reading, Leo's cruelty, the cars, Robert's letter, the $38 million. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from sleeping in an unfamiliar position. Through the window, she could see it was already past 9. She'd slept later than she had in months. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Helen and 1 text from Leo. Designers coming at 10. Where did you put Dad's golf clubs? Not, are you okay? Or, where did you stay last night? Just a question about golf clubs. Beth ignored it and pulled out Robert's letter again, finding the section about Marcus Weatherby. The contact information was there. A phone number with a British country code and an email address. She hesitated for only a moment before dialing. The phone rang 3 times before a cultured British voice answered. Marcus Weatherby. Mr. Weatherby, this is Beth Young, Robert's wife, widow. The words still felt strange in her mouth. There was a brief pause. Then, Mrs. Young, I've been expecting your call. His voice softened with genuine warmth. First, please accept my sincere condolences for your loss. Robert was not just a client, but a friend. A good man. Thank you. Beth's throat tightened. I'm a bit overwhelmed. I only discovered the garage and its contents last night. Yes? Robert mentioned you wouldn't know until after his passing. Rather dramatic of him, if I may say so, but he felt it necessary. A pause. How are you managing? The simple question, asked with such genuine concern by a complete stranger, nearly undid her composure. I'm not sure yet. Perfectly understandable. Would it help if I came to see you? I'm actually in Los Angeles this week. I could be at the garage in 2 hours if that's convenient. Beth looked around the space, at the cars gleaming in the morning light, at the office where she'd spent the night, at the safe still hanging open with its treasure trove of documents. That would be wonderful, she said. Exactly 2 hours later, a modest silver sedan pulled up outside the garage. Beth, who'd spent the intervening time freshening up in the bathroom and trying to make herself presentable, watched through the window as a distinguished man emerged. Marcus Weatherby looked to be in his mid-60s, with silver hair swept back from a refined face. He wore a tweed jacket with leather patches at the elbows over a crisp shirt and carried a slim leather portfolio. Everything about him spoke of old-world elegance and expertise. Beth opened the door before he could knock. Mrs. Young, he extended his handshake firm and warm. A pleasure to meet you, though I wish it were under happier circumstances. Please call me Beth. She stepped aside to let him enter. Marcus paused just inside the doorway, his gaze moving over the 3 cars with obvious appreciation. Magnificent. Robert chose extraordinarily well. He turned to her, but then he always did. They settled in the office area with coffee from a thermos Marcus had thoughtfully brought. As they sat across from each other at the small desk, Beth found herself relaxing slightly. There was something inherently trustworthy about this man. Perhaps it was the gentle British accent, or the way his eyes crinkled with kindness when he smiled. I imagine you have quite a few questions, Marcus began, opening his portfolio. I'll try to answer as many as I can. How did all of this start? Beth asked. Robert never showed any particular interest in cars. We just had regular vehicles for getting around. Marcus smiled. He explained that to me once, actually. Said he'd always loved cars as a boy, but life got in the way. Career, family, responsibilities. When he received his diagnosis 6 years ago, he decided it was time to pursue something that brought him joy. Something tangible. But why keep it secret from me? Marcus leaned forward slightly. That question I asked him as well. His answer was that he wanted to create something pure, untainted by grief or obligation. If you'd known he was building this collection while he was dying, every acquisition would have been colored by sadness. This way, he could work on it as a project of hope, not despair. Beth absorbed this. It made a certain kind of sense, though it still hurt to have been excluded. He began acquiring the vehicles approximately 6 years ago, Marcus continued, pulling out documentation. He was extraordinarily methodical in his approach. Each purchase was carefully researched for authenticity, provenance, and investment potential. The Aston Martin was his first acquisition. He said it reminded him of the James Bond films you'd watched together. Beth smiled despite herself. He loved those movies. The Mercedes came next, followed by the Ferrari. Each one has appreciated significantly since purchase. Marcus slid a document across the desk. Current market valuations, based on recent comparable sales. Beth scanned the numbers. They matched what Robert had written in his letter. And what am I supposed to do with them? She asked quietly. I don't know anything about vintage cars or the collector market. I wouldn't even know where to begin. You don't need to do anything immediately, Marcus assured her. Robert has paid for secure storage and maintenance for the next 5 years. The cars are insured, climate controlled, and regularly serviced. You could keep them as investments, sell them individually or as a collection, or even drive them if you wished, though that would affect their value somewhat. He paused, studying her carefully. The important thing is that you have options, Beth. Robert wanted to give you choices, not obligations. He left me more than just the cars, Beth said. Properties, investments. I'm still trying to comprehend it all. Marcus nodded. He mentioned he was building a comprehensive portfolio. Robert was nothing if not thorough. He pulled another document from his portfolio. This is my contact information, along with recommendations for estate attorneys, financial advisors, and property managers. All vetted, all trustworthy. Robert wanted to ensure you had access to the best possible guidance. Beth took the document, overwhelmed by the level of care Robert had put into every detail. Even from beyond the grave, he was taking care of her. There's one more thing, Marcus said, a note of warmth entering his voice. Robert asked me to tell you something if we met under these circumstances. He made me memorize it, actually, to make sure I got it right. He cleared his throat. He said, tell Beth that every car I bought, every property I acquired, every decision I made about this inheritance was made with love. Tell her I'm sorry for the confusion and the secrecy. But most of all, tell her she deserves every bit of this. And more, tell her she was never, ever useless. Beth's eyes filled with tears. Marcus discreetly pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. He knew, she whispered. He knew what Leo would say. Robert loved his son, Marcus said gently. But he wasn't blind to who Leo had become. That's why he structured things this way. They talked for another hour, Marcus patiently explaining the maintenance schedules, the insurance policies, the network of specialists who could help with any aspect of car ownership. By the time he prepared to leave, Beth felt slightly less overwhelmed. One last piece of advice, Marcus said as he stood to go. Don't rush into any decisions. Take your time. Grieve, process. The cars will be here when you're ready to decide their fate. After Marcus left, Beth stood alone in the garage, looking at the three magnificent machines. The Aston Martin gleamed in the afternoon light, its silver paint reflecting her image back to her. She looked different somehow. Not like a useless old woman. Not like someone who'd been discarded. She looked like a woman with $12 million in assets and $38 million more in property and investments. A woman with options. A woman with power. A woman who needed to decide what to do with it all. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Leo. Seriously, Mom, where are the golf clubs? And when are you picking up the rest of your stuff? Beth looked at the message for a long moment. Then she typed a reply. I'll come by this week to collect my things. We should talk. She didn't tell him where she was. Didn't explain about the cottage in Carmel or the cars or the fortune Robert had left her. Let him think she was staying with Helen. Let him think she was helpless and dependent. Let him continue to reveal exactly who he was. Because Beth Young was done making excuses for her son, done accepting crumbs of affection and calling it love, done being small to make others feel big. Robert had given her more than money. He'd given her the truth about her son and the freedom to act on it. What she did with that freedom would define the rest of her life. The drive to Carmel should have taken 4 hours, but Beth stretched it to 5, taking the scenic route along Highway 1. She needed the time to think, to process, to let the Pacific Ocean work its ancient magic on her fractured soul. The coastal highway wound along cliffs that dropped dramatically to the sea below. Waves crashed against rocks in explosions of white foam. Seabirds wheeled overhead, their cries carried on the salt-tinged wind. Beth drove with the windows down, letting the cool October air wash away the stale grief that had clung to her since Robert's funeral. She'd left the garage that morning with a small overnight bag packed with the clothes Robert had provided. The rest of her belongings, what little Leo hadn't already disposed of, could wait. Right now, she needed to see this cottage, this place Robert had bought 4 years ago without telling her, this home he'd prepared for the future he knew he wouldn't share. The GPS directed her off the highway into Carmel by the sea proper. The town looked like something from a fairy tale. Cottages with stone facades and pitched roofs, art galleries with window displays that changed with the seasons, restaurants tucked into buildings that seemed to have grown organically from the landscape itself. Turn right on Scenic Drive, the GPS instructed. The street lived up to its name. Pine and cypress trees created a canopy overhead, their branches twisted by decades of coastal wind into dramatic shapes. Through gaps in the foliage, Beth caught glimpses of the ocean, impossibly blue in the afternoon sun. Arriving at destination, on right. The cottage sat back from the road, partially hidden behind mature cypress trees that had been sculpted by wind and time into natural sculptures. A natural wood gate, weathered to a soft grey, opened onto a flagstone path that curved through a small garden. Beth sat in her car for a moment, engine off, just looking. The cottage itself was modest, perhaps 1,200 square feet, she guessed, with a stone facade and a pitched roof of weathered cedar shakes. Window boxes held lavender and rosemary, still blooming despite the season. A small patio was barely visible around the side, furnished with what looked like comfortable outdoor furniture. It was charming, peaceful, perfect, and it was hers. Beth retrieved the key from the envelope, a different key than the garage. This one, newer, attached to a tag that simply read, "Home," and walked up the flagstone path. Her hands trembled only slightly as she unlocked the Dutch door. The interior stopped her in her tracks. Sunlight poured through multi-paned windows, illuminating a living room that looked as if it had been designed specifically for her preferences. Built-in bookshelves surrounded a stone fireplace, already stocked with her favorite novels. Books she'd mentioned loving over the years, books she'd read until the covers were soft with handling. A comfortable sofa in her preferred shade of blue faced the fireplace, with soft throw pillows in complementary colors. The hardwood floors gleamed, partially covered with hand-woven rugs in subtle patterns that wouldn't overwhelm the space. Beth moved through the cottage in a daze. The kitchen was updated but traditional, with white cabinets, butcher block counters, and vintage-style appliances that looked charming but functioned with modern efficiency. A small breakfast nook overlooked the back garden through a bay window, the table already set with simple white dishes and fresh flowers in a blue ceramic vase. The single bedroom was cozy rather than large, with a queen bed covered in white linens and a handmade quilt in shades of blue and cream. French doors opened onto a private patio with a glimpse of the ocean between neighboring properties. Beth could hear the waves from here, a constant gentle rhythm that seemed to slow her heartbeat to match. But it was the small study of the living room that finally broke through her careful composure. Above a simple writing desk hung a painting she recognized immediately, a watercolor of the Venice Canal. Not the original painting from their 35th anniversary trip, which had been lost years ago in a movie. This was a replica, but so perfectly rendered, it might as well have been the original. The scene showed the Rialto Bridge at sunset, the light catching the water in shades of gold and amber. In the lower corner, tiny figures stood on the bridge, a man and woman embracing while a street musician played nearby. Beth and Robert, frozen in the happiest moment of one of their happiest trips. She sank into the desk chair, finally allowing herself to cry. Not the desperate sobs of the previous night, but something gentler. Tears of grief, yes, but also tears of gratitude, of being seen, of being loved so completely that someone would recreate a lost painting just to bring comfort. Robert had designed this space with such care. Every detail spoke of attention, of knowledge gained over decades of marriage. The colors she preferred, the books she loved, the quiet she craved, even the view. Just a glimpse of ocean, not overwhelming, exactly as she would have chosen. He'd given her not just a house, but a home, a sanctuary, a place to begin again. Beth had just composed herself and was exploring the small linen closet, stocked, she discovered, with fresh towels and sheets in her preferred thread count, when a soft knock sounded at the front door. Through the window, she saw an elegant woman in her early 70s, standing on the doorstep, holding a covered dish. Beth opened the door, self-conscious about her tear-stained face. "Hello," the woman said warmly, her smile reaching eyes that held both kindness and understanding. "You must be Beth. I'm Margaret Hayes, your neighbor 2 doors down." She lifted the dish slightly. "Robert asked me to keep an eye out for when you arrived." "You knew Robert?" Beth's voice came out rough from crying. Margaret nodded. "He visited several times over the past 4 years, preparing the cottage. He was very particular about getting everything just right." Her expression softened. "I'm one of the few people who knew about his project. He made me promise not to reach out until you came to claim the place." She paused, studying Beth with gentle concern. "I thought you might not want to worry about cooking your first night here. It's just a simple casserole, nothing fancy." The kindness of the gesture, a stranger welcoming her, caring about whether she ate, touched something tender in Beth's chest. "Would you like to come in?" "I'd love to if you're up for company, but I understand completely if you need time alone." Beth surprised herself by stepping aside. "Please, I could use a friendly face." Over tea in the kitchen, Margaret had brought a thermos along with the casserole. Beth learned that her new neighbor was a retired school principal who'd lost her husband 8 years earlier. "Thomas had a heart attack while playing tennis," Margaret said, stirring honey into her tea. "One moment he was fine, the next he was gone. No warning, no chance to say goodbye." She met Beth's eyes. "In some ways, I think your situation might be harder. You had warning, time to prepare, but also time to watch someone you love fade away." "I didn't know I was preparing," Beth admitted. "Not really." Robert always downplayed his condition. "I had no idea he was planning all this." Margaret smiled. "He was quite meticulous about it. He'd bring photographs of your penthouse in Los Angeles, trying to capture your aesthetic. He wanted this place to feel familiar, but also new. A bridge between your old life and whatever came next. He never mentioned any of it to me. He said it was for your protection." Margaret chose her words carefully. "He didn't elaborate, but he did say that when you finally came, you might need a friend, someone who understood what it was like to rebuild a life after loss." Beth felt tears threatening again. "I'm sorry. I seem to be crying a lot lately." "Don't apologize. Grief isn't tidy. It doesn't follow a schedule." Margaret reached across the table and squeezed Beth's hand. "I'm here, 2 doors down, whenever you need company. Or whenever you need someone to just sit with you in silence. Both are valid." They talked for another hour. Margaret shared stories about the neighborhood, the retired chef who lived across the street and made bread every Sunday, the artist who painted seascapes from her garage studio, the book club that met monthly at the local library. "We'd love to have you join when you're ready," Margaret said. "No pressure, but we're a welcoming group, and we always need fresh perspectives on books." She paused, then added with a hint of mischief. "There's also a gentleman in the group, David Morrison, retired architect. Recently widowed himself. He's been asking about the new neighbor since Robert mentioned someone would be moving in eventually." Beth felt her cheeks warm. Robert just died 3 weeks ago." "Of course," Margaret said quickly. "I wasn't suggesting anything romantic, just mentioning that there are kind people here, a community if you want it." She smiled. "Though David is lovely. When you're ready, in a year or 5 or never, Just putting it out there. By the time Margaret left, promising to check in tomorrow and leaving her phone number for anything, anytime, Beth felt less alone than she had since Robert's death. She wandered through the cottage again, this time noticing details she'd missed before. A basket of fresh fruit on the kitchen counter, a folder in the study desk labeled "Welcome Home," containing practical information, the names of local doctors, a nearby grocery store, the library hours, even a map of favorite walking paths along the beach. Robert had thought of everything, even her emotional needs, even friendship. In the desk drawer, she found another note in his handwriting. Beth, if you're reading this, you found your way to Carmel, and the home I hope brings you peace. I wish more than anything I could be sharing this next chapter with you. Walking the beach in the morning fog, reading by the fireplace in the evening, growing old together in this gentle place. But since I can't be there, I've done my best to prepare a space that will care for you in my absence. The cottage is yours to use however you wish, as a permanent home, a weekend retreat, or even to sell if it doesn't suit you. My only hope is that it offers you a fresh start, free from obligations or expectations that don't serve your happiness. Margaret is wonderful, by the way. I trust her judgment completely. If she suggests something, a doctor, a restaurant, a book club, a widowed architect, there's usually wisdom in it. Be happy, my love. You deserve nothing less. That evening, Beth sat on the private patio behind her bedroom, wrapped in a soft throw blanket as the sun set over the Pacific. The sky turned shades of amber and rose. The clouds edged with gold. Waves rolled onto the beach below, their rhythm ancient and soothing. Her phone sat on the small table beside her, lit up with notifications she'd been ignoring all day. 3 missed calls from Helen, 2 voicemails from Leo, both sounding increasingly irritated about golf clubs and storage and inconvenience. 1 text from a number she didn't recognize. This is Diane Parker, Mr. Young's assistant. He asked me to coordinate a time for you to collect your remaining items from the penthouse. Please respond at your earliest convenience. Beth stared at the messages, thinking about the past 24 hours. Yesterday, at this time, she'd been sitting in Harrison Blackwell's office, listening to a will that made her feel worthless. Yesterday, her son had called her useless and thrown her out of her home on her 68th birthday. Yesterday, she'd believed herself to be alone, abandoned, with nothing but a mysterious garage and an uncertain future. Now she sat in a beautiful cottage overlooking the ocean, knowing she had millions of dollars in assets, properties generating steady income, and a future limited only by her own choices. The garage key that had seemed like such a cruel joke had unlocked not just a building, but a truth. Robert had loved her more deeply than she'd realized, had valued her more highly than she'd valued herself, had seen through their son's veneer to the calculating man beneath. And Leo had no idea. He thought he'd won, thought he'd claimed the valuable inheritance while his useless mother got the scraps. He was probably already planning penthouse renovations, already calculating the worth of his new assets, already congratulating himself on his good fortune. Beth could tell him the truth right now, could text him about the cars, the properties, the $38 million, could watch his reaction, claim some petty satisfaction from his shock and regret. But Robert's letter had been clear. Character reveals itself most clearly at moments of inheritance, both what we receive and what we believe we deserve. Leo was still revealing his character, still showing Beth exactly who he was when he thought there were no consequences, when he believed his mother was powerless. What would happen if she let him continue? If she gave him time to either rise to the better version of himself or sink further into the worst? The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in deeper shades of orange and red. Beth picked up her phone and composed a message to Diane Parker. I'll come by the penthouse on Friday to collect my things. Please let Leo know I'd like to speak with him then. She didn't say where she was staying, didn't explain her plans, didn't give any hint that her circumstances had changed. Then she opened a new message to Helen. I'm okay, taking some time to myself. We'll explain soon. Don't worry, I love you. Finally, she pulled up Leo's last text about the golf clubs and typed, they're in the storage unit in the parking garage. Level B2, Unit 47, code is your birthday. Helpful, polite, giving him exactly what he'd asked for and nothing more. She sent the messages and set the phone aside. Tomorrow, she would start learning about property management and investment portfolios, would begin understanding the empire Robert had built for her, would meet with the attorneys and advisors Marcus had recommended. But tonight, she would sit in her beautiful cottage and watch the sunset and allow herself to simply exist in this moment between grief and possibility. She was no longer the woman who'd been evicted yesterday, no longer the person who'd believed herself to be useless. She was Beth Young, widow, property owner, multi-millionaire. And she was just beginning to understand what that meant. Inside the cottage, her phone buzzed with Leo's reply. Finally, I'll have the designers reschedule around Friday afternoon. Don't be late. Not thank you. Not are you okay? Not even basic courtesy. Just demands and dismissal. Beth read the message, then looked back at the sunset. The sky was deepening now, stars beginning to appear in the darkening east, while the west still held the last light of day. She thought of Robert, planning all this in secret, building her safety net, thread by thread while his heart grew weaker, choosing each car, each property, each detail of this cottage with her in mind. I understand now, she whispered to the ocean breeze. You weren't just leaving me money. You were leaving me the truth about Leo, about my own strength, about what I deserve. The truth was hard. It hurt to see her son so clearly, to recognize that the boy she'd raised had been lost somewhere along the way to the man he'd become. But the truth also set her free. Free to make her own choices about what came next. Free to decide if and when to share this wealth. Free to demand respect instead of accepting scraps. Free to begin again. Beth Young wrapped the blanket tighter and watched the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. In the cottage behind her, lights glowed warm through the windows. Her cottage, her home, her new beginning. Tomorrow would bring decisions and challenges. Tomorrow, she would step fully into the life Robert had built for her. But tonight, on her first evening in Carmel, Beth simply breathed in the salt air and felt something she hadn't experienced in longer than she could remember. Hope.